Hello and welcome to the MMQB NFL podcast. I'm Gary Granley.
And I'm Connor Orr.
And Connor, we have a very special guest coming up. Someone you know, by the way.
I would argue the most special guest.
Yeah, you could say. So listen, before we get to that, I just want to start off this show with a little note for everyone. I know a lot of people probably saw the title of this episode and just didn't click play. They're not going to listen to it. And some of you are very interested in listening to the show and want to be more informed about the Deshaun Watson cases. But what I'm about to say is more directed toward those of you who have started listening to today's show and maybe you're on the fence about whether you're about to click stop and go, find some nice NPR podcast to listen to or something like that. Or if you're going to invest more time and energy into a story that's been talked about a whole lot over the past year. But this is why we're doing yet another show on Deshaun Watson. Every once in a while, well, more often than that, but we'll say every once in a while for now, there is a sports story that will have consequences beyond the sports world. That's what this story has been. Just a very small part of this is the football aspect, a great player, and how great he might make a team that he's been traded to in terms of wins and losses, Super Bowls, etc. Much more than that, this has been a story about the intersection between the immense power we grant superstar athletes and, quite frankly, the plague of sexual violence that we have in this country. And for many, this has been a really good moment to sit back and learn about these things. Yet, this story has kind of been hijacked from the start by whether it's lawyers or agents or media members who are so desperate to gain and keep the favor of those lawyers and agents because those little insignificant transactional crumbs of information that they'll get from those powerful sources ends up sort of being their lifeblood. But a little more than a year ago, Jenny Vrentas set out, and I set out to help her with this, to report this Deshaun Watson story independently. We did not know what we would find. The stories we did find, they were free of spin, and what we found was disturbing, it was upsetting, it was alarming, and meanwhile, the misinformation that's been coming out, I mean, we still have these just bizarre conspiracy theories going around about what has happened here. It's just been staggering, and the truth has been buried several times over now. So on the show, I know we've done this before, but we're going to try to unearth the truth of the Deshaun Watson cases once again. And to do it, we welcome back New York Times reporter, the person who has led on this story from the very start, and yes, one of our very favorite people in the world, Jenny Vrentas. Jenny, welcome back.
Hello, Gary and Connor. I am so excited to be back. It is always a pleasure to be talking with both of you. No place I'd rather talk about this story with than you, and you are also some of my very favorite people in the world.
And I just want to say, we'll have Jenny back again for some lighter fare at some point.
Yes, definitely. I know it sounds weird to say I'm excited to be back given the gravity of the topic we're talking about, but I'm very glad to be here with you both.
So this is how we're going to do it. We're going to break this up into the press conference, the introductory press conference for Deshaun Watson, which happened on Friday. And we are also going to, once again, just run through some of the facts of the case that, again, have just been buried under this torrent of just kind of garbage misinformation that's been going out there. And we'll start at the same place that Andrew Berry started it, which was, he came out in his opening remarks and said the team did indeed not reach out to any of the 22 plaintiffs who have filed a civil complaint against Deshaun Watson. He said they had not because they were, the Browns had not because they were advised by their lawyers that it could be interfering with a criminal investigation. Now, the criminal investigation, of course, has since wrapped up. I'm not sure if there was anything necessarily stopping them from reaching out to Tony Buzbee himself and sort of getting some information that way, or reaching out to UA Lewis, who is the attorney for a woman who we call Mary, a massage therapist who gave us an account of her massage therapy session with Watson that was upsetting for a number of reasons. She is not suing Watson. She just wanted to do so as sort of a public witness. But I'm still not quite sure why the Browns are standing up on this when it seems like there's, I don't know, it just seems like there's not a great excuse, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, I agree, Gary. It was a strange defense given that by the time the Browns executed the trade for Deshaun Watson, 9 of the 10 criminal cases had been closed. There was, of course, one additional one that would later be heard by a grand jury, but the criminal investigations were long concluded. I mean, the police investigation had been done for a very long time. And even before the grand jury, a long time before the grand jury's convened, a criminal investigation is traditionally completed. So that explanation didn't make very much sense. But as you said, there's no reason why they couldn't have reached out to Tony Busby, the attorney representing the 22 plaintiffs, or UA Lewis, who represents Mary. And they sort of used the question about, have you spoken to the women? And they said, we were cautioned for reaching out to them directly. But no one was saying you have to call them directly, but you should at least call the lawyer and see if any of the women are open to speaking with you, or perhaps he has a packet of information he could share. He released some of that information to the public at the press conferences last year, maybe some of their depositions or sworn testimonies. Maybe there was additional information that the lawyer representing the women would be willing to share. So it didn't hold up, also didn't hold up against the fact that the NFL has, as of last August, they had interviewed at least 10 of the plaintiffs, and that was long before the criminal investigation was complete. So the NFL was able to proceed with those interviews without fear of interfering. So it's very hard to discuss a thorough, in-depth 5-month odyssey, as Andrew Berry referred to it, without any real effort to hear directly from the side of the women, because they're getting a lot of information directly from Watson's attorney, Hardin, and potentially his agent, David Mulugeta. Why are you not getting information directly from the other side? You know, he mentioned, Andrew Berry mentioned independent investigative resources in the Houston law enforcement community. That's very different from somebody who works for the Houston police. The law enforcement community is kind of a vague term. And he said because of that, they felt that they got a well-rounded, report or, inquiry into what had actually gone on. But again, it's very hard to do that when a lot of the pertinent information is in possession of the plaintiffs or the plaintiff's attorney. And by pertinent information, Gary, that's in several cases corroborating information, contemporaneous witnesses, things like that.
I think from a broad perspective, it's interesting, what I thought when I saw Andrew Berry walk out there was that if you had to have such an expansive, carefully worded preamble before you even started this, doesn't that tip you off from just a moral human perspective to be like, maybe this isn't the best idea? Like you had to, it was just like 15 minutes of like, before you ask me any questions, here's a very carefully prepared statement by our attorneys that I have to read about this signing that we all feel really good about, and the juxtaposition of that felt laughable to me. It's just like, if you felt good about it, then you wouldn't need your lawyer to have written you a statement and then stuck by, and I'm sure we'll get to this when we dive into the press conference, but very specific wording throughout that I think guards you from certain things. And, like if you felt great about it, then I feel like the other stuff wouldn't have been necessary, no?
I think that's very true, Connor. And I'm glad you brought up some of the language here. And I wanna put this out here. First, we're gonna play a clip from Andrew Berry. This was actually the very last part of the press conference, and we will get to the stuff in the middle in just a bit. But he had been asked whether he and the organization believe there was any wrongdoing by Deshaun Watson, and his answer was, like a lot of things in this press conference, not exactly direct.
Andrew, I just wanted to ask, obviously, you've talked about the investigation and the research. Deshaun is obviously maintaining his innocence. After all of that, do you and does this organization believe there was no wrongdoing?
Dan, we feel very confident in Deshaun the person, and we have a lot of faith in him. And we believe that as he gets into the community and our organization, he's going to make a positive impact.
So yeah, I don't know that it's just it's clear that it's not. The answer's not no. Like the answer is not. We feel there was no wrongdoing. It was kind of just a non-answer. It's sort of a very general answer to a specific question.
Yeah, that struck me as well. It was non-specific, and because it was the last question in the press conference, and then right after that, PR official said, "Okay, time for a photo op," and there was Watson holding his Ford jersey, surrounded by Barry and Stefanski. The answer to that question kind of hung in the air over what is, a traditionally celebratory moment, right, where you have your new acquisition holding their new jersey. And I think the fact that Barry didn't give a direct answer says a lot. It was very forward looking. We feel confident in him, the person, and that as he gets into our community and our organization, he'll make a positive impact. So he's essentially saying we don't foresee there will be any problems when he's in Cleveland. It's very different from saying we don't believe there was any wrongdoing to this point. And I think juxtaposed with some of Watson's comments, at times almost defiant when asked about some of these allegations. It just hung in the air, and it was the lasting impression, I think, for the press conference, because it's basically essentially said, we gave up all this draft capital, we guaranteed $230 million, and we can't say definitively that he did not commit any wrongdoing.
Yeah, when Gary and I spoke like a little bit after the press conference, those were the words that stuck with me. And he kept saying basically different versions of, I'm confident in the person that Deshaun will be in the future, and I'm confident in the work that we put in to this process. And so what that read to me, and I don't know. I've only done 3 years of Stanford law, so I don't know exactly how. I'm just kidding. I never went to law school. But what that read to me was, if you were to have if you were to give a lawyer 3 beers and say, tell me exactly what that guy is saying, I would say what Andrew Barry really was saying in that moment was, we're pretty sure if anything else comes out, we can muddy the water enough to get away with this. And we're also positive that Deshaun is going to act in a way that's going to, from here on out, to continue our efforts in just obscuring the picture of what kind of person he might be. So, I think that was what stuck out to me is, it's almost like they feel like they're smarter than everybody else. And so they're just sort of trying to get by on acting that way. And it was a very thinly veiled attempt at, just trying to get one over on everybody. But, not everybody speaks legalese. And so I think it was one of those things that could have flown over everyone's head, but he just kept saying those two things, which stuck out to me, at least personally.
So those were the words that Andrew Barry used at the introductory press conference. I want to highlight one more person before we get to Deshaun's words. This is Rusty Hardin. These are a couple of statements that he has released over the past year. And again, I just want to sort of illustrate how more careful the language has become when it's coming from Deshaun Watson's camp at this point. Now, this first statement is from last April. So this is April 2021. This is from Rusty Hardin. This is part of a larger statement, but this is the part I want to highlight here. Mr. Watson has been adamant that he did not engage in any improper conduct, and we strongly believe him. Therefore, the answer to the question of whether we are saying that all 22 plaintiffs are lying about the allegations of sexual misconduct by Mr. Watson is a resounding yes. Now, this next statement was last week after Deshaun Watson had been cleared of a 10th criminal complaint in Brazoria County by a grand jury. This is Rusty Hardin's statement, read in part. We are thrilled that the Brazoria County grand jury cleared Deshaun Watson of the one remaining criminal allegation. We've known all along what people who learn the facts also know: Deshaun committed no crimes. Now that sounds fairly similar, but the difference is not really subtle in the end. It went from absolutely nothing wrong to did not commit any crimes, and we'll get to in just a moment. Some of these statistics, staggering statistics around sexual violence and how these things are resolved in this country and in the state of Texas. But before we get to that, I do just want to play a couple of clips from Deshaun Watson from Friday's introductory press conference. He had said, among other things, he was asked about possibly getting therapy. He said he didn't really know how to answer that because he doesn't have a problem. He said he has no regrets over everything that has transpired over the last couple of years here in regards to presumably everything that has been discussed on this show numerous times. But I do want to play 4 clips of Deshaun Watson saying he never disrespected any woman.
I've never assaulted any woman. I never disrespected any woman. I was raised by a single-parent mom who has 2 aunties who's her sister, and that's who raised me. I was raised to be genuine and respect everyone and everything around me. What I can continue to do is tell the truth, and that is I've never assaulted or disrespected or harassed any woman in my life. Like I said before, I was raised differently. That's not my DNA. That's not my culture. That's not me as a person, and that's not how I was raised. Like I said before, I never assaulted anyone, never disrespected anyone. I've always been respectful, and that's what I've always, stood on, and that's who I am as a person. All I can say is, again, I never assaulted, I never disrespected, and I never harassed any woman in my life. I wasn't raised that way. My mom and my aunties didn't raise me that way. Over the course of my life, that's not in my DNA.
All right, so we are going to dive back into the facts, but I do want to start, Jenny, with sort of some of the meaning that's gotten twisted around the no bill decisions by 2 grand juries, 2 separate grand juries at this point. Harris County had 9 criminal complaints, and then Brazoria County last week had a 10th complaint.
Right, Gary. So we know that 2 grand juries considered 10 different criminal complaints that were filed against Deshaun Watson. They were in 2 separate counties, and both grand juries declined to indict on any of those counts. But I think it's also important to look at the context beyond that simple fact to sort of explain it a little bit more. And that is what we've talked about a lot over the past year, that the criminal justice system is ill-equipped to handle sexual violence. And that's not an opinion. That's based on statistics. If you look at what's been reported by RAINN, which is the nation's largest anti-sexual violence organization, per their account, out of every 1,000 sexual assaults, only 300